Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 201.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. Here's what we're doing. I'm sure you have figured it out. If not from the title, you've been around, you have known, you have heard, and here we are again. What we're talking about now is that elusive number, $100,000. For many of us, we think that $100,000 a year would be great. I know, that idea, $100,000 a year, being able to choose what we want and have our business, blah, blah, blah. Well, here's what I want to do. We're going to be talking now for the next little while to individuals who earn what you're thinking about in a year, but who have done it in a month. And that's the key I want you to think about. Think about what you currently earn in a year. Learn to believe that you can do this in a month. And we're going to talk to some individuals who have done exactly that. Now, today's guest has absolutely been featured on the podcast before, episode 170, if you haven't checked it out. And he is none other than Jason Hartman. So I'm going to let him do most of the talking because I know there's so much that you are going to be able to learn from an individual who has been able to transcend what many of us start out believing is just absolutely impossible, dare I say improbable. But we're going to show you through the next set of interviews that not only is it possible, but it's possible for you, and you're going to learn how. So help me welcome Jason Hartman. Jason, how are you doing?
Hey, good, Jay. Thanks for having me back. It's great. This is a great topic, by the way. I really commend you on your creativity for this. This is just an awesome topic.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And like we were talking before, I wish I could take credit. I actually got the idea from church because they do series at church. And I was like, hey, we should do a series because that's when more people tend to show up on Sundays because they know what's coming next. So I was like, hey, let's see what would be transformative. And the thing that came to my head is I'm always telling people, instead of earning what you earn a year, earn it in a month. And I just came up with $100,000 and put the call out there. And I'm grateful that you responded.
Yeah, well, thanks. And, it is a good topic because we've got to always think, regardless of what business we're in and regardless of how we're investing on the side, hopefully we're investing in income property. We're in the real estate side of things
right.
From our investments. But in our professional life, your listeners do a lot of different things. And I know, Jay, you've got listeners all over the world. But what's kind of interesting, just to sort of set this up, is to maybe just look at some of the income diversification in America. Mm. And let's talk about how we can help your listeners expand their mindset, their horizons, their context when it comes to earning over $100,000 per month. So I'll just share a couple stats with you real quick. Based on IRS, Internal Revenue Service, that's our taxing agency in America, from 2010 to 2014, here's how American income earners stack up. The top 1%, the people we heard so much, Jay, that was all what Occupy Wall Street was about, right? The top, we're the other 99%, right? Not the top 1%. So the top 1% in America, what do they really make? What is their income? We know a lot about people's net worth. There's, of course, the Forbes 400 richest people in America, the Forbes 400 richest people in the world, and you got to be a billionaire to be on that. But what about actual income rather than net worth? And the top 1% in America in the last 4 years makes about $380,000 per year. Okay? So yes. 380 grand. And we're talking about making 1.2 million. Okay. If we can do that consistently, right? So,
Yes. I think that I don't think people had that kind of context, but they're getting it now.
yeah, it's really possible. And, I'm grateful. I'm extremely grateful to say that I've had months that are over $100,000 many times in my career, and many years ago when I was much younger too. So it is completely possible, folks. It is absolutely possible. And in listening to some of these people that are in the entrepreneurial space, especially in kind of the internet marketing world
Right.
and the real estate world. I mean, some of these kids in their like early 20s are doing this, and this is not Mark Zuckerberg who founded Facebook type stuff. This is just regular people that most people haven't even heard of. Okay, they're just
I know. That's the part that, well, the funny thing is they could be sitting next to you right now as you're in the grocery store listening to this, and you wouldn't even know it.
Totally.
And that's what I love about it. So for just a little splash of context, give us some of the understanding, because again, like I said before, not everyone's listened to the prior episode, but give us a little context of some of the things that you do, your businesses, etc., where this has occurred for you, so that we can begin to formulate some questions and some ideas and possibly pull out some systems that could help other people do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to be very transparent with your listeners. I've always been around the real estate business since I was inspired to get into it at age 16, grew up poor, and didn't like living with limited resources, didn't want to live that way as an adult. I got my real estate license when I was 19, started as a real estate agent when I was in college, just part-time. And, then it grew from there. I bought a real estate company, sold it to Coldwell Banker about 8 years later. And then, but did very well as a real estate agent, always was investing on the side, and did very well with my real estate investments too. And for the last 11 years, I've been helping real estate investors only. So now I'm in kind of like a really unique, niche side of the real estate industry. And, I've been investing. I became a developer about a year and a half ago for the first time. So I'm developing 71 houses now. And, I haven't made $100,000 from that yet. It takes a while for that to sort of come together, but we'll see how it goes.
It's coming.
I hope so. And, that's kind of what I do. I also do hard money lending on real estate deals. And Jay, I just got to tell you, when I stay away from funds and Wall Street and pooled money investments, I do well. When I do that stuff, and eventually I just can't seem to learn my lesson. I'll admit it. I'll probably do it again. I hate to say it. These deals come along and they look too good to be true, and they usually are. And I usually don't do so well in those. But when I'm in control of my stuff and I'm doing my own deals, they almost always go quite well.
Yeah,
so
I gotcha. Control is I think an underlying theme that we're going to hear and will hear consistently throughout all of this. So obviously in the real estate space, I don't think anyone is challenged to believe that you could do $100,000 in a month, because it's, real estate and the cost of it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So since we don't necessarily have to really go like, wow, I can't believe that there are that many people who would participate in real estate and you'd be able to earn that, what would you say is more important, money or the mission? Money or the mission? Yeah. If I'm on this journey, I'm starting today and I've got my business going, or I'm wanting to get to the $100,000 a month level, is it the money or the mission that's going to help me get there?
Okay, so that's a great question. Let's dice that up a little bit for your listeners, okay? First of all, I interviewed a professor on one of my podcasts who is a business professor back east somewhere, can't remember the school, but he talked about this thing about, what everybody says. It's the generic thing everybody says, follow your passion and the money will follow. Follow your dreams and the money will follow. Do something you love and the money will follow. In fact, I think there's even a book with that title. And that sounds great on its surface. But he diced that up a little bit better for me, and I think this is important. Maybe what you love is not your actual business. Like maybe you don't love selling widgets, right? That's
Right.
not the thing. But what you do love is your entrepreneurial freedom. Okay, so it doesn't have to be, I think most people when they hear that kind of like the mission, the passion thing, I mean it's great if you can have that completely aligned. But for most people, I don't know that it really happens that way. If you sell, I don't know, what's really boring. Say you are in the industrial business and you sell ball bearings for roller skate wheels and
There you go.
skateboard wheels and stuff like that. I really doubt anybody like wakes up in the morning and says, "Wow, my ball bearings that go into those skateboard wheels are like the greatest thing ever, man." I mean, it's possible I'm wrong about this, okay? But that's not necessarily the passion in and of itself. But the passion is maybe, look, I'm financially free. I left my corporate job. I don't work in a cubicle. I don't have a boss telling me what to do. So you see what I mean about that distinction?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people all the time, I actually don't like real estate. I don't.
Really?
I don't. I like the benefits real estate brings to the table.
Okay.
I mean, if spoons in and of themselves had the same benefits, I would be all about spoons. But spoons don't have those benefits. Real estate does.
Right. And real estate, it's a multidimensional asset class, so it's so awesome. I just love it. Maybe I don't really like real estate either, that's sort of interesting to think of it. But let me give you one mindset thing that I think is important. So
Yeah.
a big influence on me was that my mother, who struggled, most of my life growing up, okay, or pretty much all of my life growing up past 18, okay. I remember that, she used to work for the Leukemia Society, and she always wanted to, stop bumping her head against the glass ceiling, which back in those days was, much more real than it is today.
Right.
Sorry, ladies, I just don't think it's that real anymore. I'm sure there are a few examples of it, but I don't think it's like as much of a problem as some people say it is. Okay, but whatever. Argue with me if you want. Hate me if you want for saying that. But
Just make sure you give them your email address so they don't send it to me. I'm good.
the hate mail is coming, right? But look, I mean, nowadays, I mean, the world is fortunately pretty open place. Like, there's all kinds of examples of people from every walk of life, every gender that is doing great things. Okay, and so she was always bumping her head against the glass ceiling, wanted to be financially independent. And so she, I remember as a teenager, we used to go to like franchise expos and look for business opportunities and all that kind of stuff. So she finally bought 2 small businesses. It took her a lot of saving to do that. And one of them was a Pioneer Chicken franchise. And, for people who don't know, that's like a lamer version of Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is already pretty lame, probably, right? Okay. And so she bought this business. And, I remember all the struggles she went through, getting robbed all the time and, one time kind of violently. And it was just a terrible experience. But the thing was, the thinking, I remember us talking about this. And she finally got into real estate when I was about 18 years old, just about 6 months before I did. And the comparison we were both talking about is that, look, when you wait on a customer at a fast food store and you sell them a piece of chicken, you got to smile to make a couple of bucks. And in real estate, because it's a high ticket item, you smile and you make a couple $1,000. Okay.
Yes.
And the metaphor is that we've all got to maybe do some stuff we don't like occasionally, and maybe we've got to be friendly even when we don't feel friendly. Okay. Yep. And we've got to manage our mood even though when we don't feel like it. That's just part of being an adult, right? And so the mindset I want to share with your listeners is a high ticket commodity is a good one. Okay. And if you're not in a high ticket commodity, you've got to take a low ticket commodity and make sure it scales. So there are many great examples of this. Before we started recording this episode, we just were having a casual conversation for a couple of minutes and talking about iPhone apps and smartphone apps.
Yep.
And so, if you sell a smartphone app for $1 or it's maybe free with upsells in the app, in-app purchases, you make very little money on each sale. but because it's so scalable and you can reach the entire planet with your app, there's a huge profit opportunity in that. So it doesn't have to be a high ticket item like real estate, although it could be. But if it's a low ticket item, it's got to be very scalable so that your mindset is on big things. And the big thing is, look, I'm going to get the whole world to just give me $1. Okay.
Nice.
And, in fact, the website Reddit is running some kind of contest about that right now as we speak, where they're trying to get a bunch of people, like 1 million people, to donate $1, and then they're just going to give it to someone, to make them a millionaire.
Nice.
You couldn't do that before the internet because, if you couldn't reach those people, what are you going to do? Direct mail saying, please send us $1? You'd lose all the money just in the marketing, right? So. Yeah.
Indeed. So I guess then this comes down to probably a very important question. Some people, say things. I mean, we hear these phrases all the time. Your attitude will determine your altitude and your aptitude and all this other stuff and these, nice things from stage. But I want to know from, a guy who's been in the trenches and made it happen, what's more important, attitude or activity? What's going to make it happen for somebody? Do we just grind it out even though we don't like it?
Yeah, those are a great question too, because, I remember when I got into Earl Nightingale, Dennis Waitley, Zig Ziglar, and Jim Rohn at age 17. I was so lucky to discover those guys. And one of the things Earl Nightingale said is he said, to ask what the role of attitude is in a person's success is like asking what the role of H2O is in the Pacific Ocean. It's everything, okay? Water in the Pacific Ocean is everything, right?
Right.
And so that attitude is like the foundation. Out of everything comes that foundation. And if we don't have a foundation of a positive attitude, of being a big thinker, there's a great old book called The Magic of Thinking Big. Yes. I can't remember the author's name.
Dr. David J. Schwartz.
You see, of course you know that, right?
Well, it was one of those key books because I was having trouble thinking big. And here's what I mean by that. Really, Jason, this is literally what I thought. I thought it was going to take me 10 years to be able to get to $10,000 a month of rental property. That's what I thought. And I was laying out the plan 10 years and I was acting appropriately because 10 years was, that's what it seemed like it was going to take. No one told me that if I applied myself, I could do it in, 2.5. No one said that. So I didn't know, but being able to think big is, oh, dude, you just hit a major nerve for me right there. That one is huge. Right.
That's a great point because sometimes our goals can actually limit us. Everything you said you were doing, Jay, was great. You had a plan, you were specific, you had a specific goal, and you had a plan to get there. You reverse engineered it, and that's awesome. But in a way, that could also be limiting, right?
Right.
And, there's another trite, great saying, shoot for the moon. If you miss, at least you'll end up in the stars, right?
Right.
And so, I think we got to have goals that are, as they say, just out of reach, but not out of sight. And they've definitely got to stretch us. But they've got to, I don't know, it's hard to sort of make this quantifiable, so it's just sort of a thing to say, but they can't be so ridiculous that our subconscious won't accept them as possible, I guess is maybe a good way to look at it,
Yeah. There were some, the subconscious is, man, that Joker's funny. So you've got to learn to deal with
I love that saying, that Joker's funny.
Yeah, it just pretty much is because it will talk you out of believing things that are totally possible. There were exercises for myself, I know, that I did. I literally sat in front of a mirror. Someone said, say these things to yourself. Say, and I did it in 3 different tenses. It was Jay makes $10,000, or no, Jay earns $10,000 a month. He earns $10,000 a month. I earn $10,000 a month. And it took me saying that multiple times to be able to not have that little voice in the back of my head at the beginning when you've never even conceived of having that happen. That's part of what it took, which gets me to the one of my more favorite questions is you mentioned Earl Nightingale and Jim Rohn and some of the greats, and I'm going to bring in Stephen Covey in his book, The Seven Habits.
Most definitely. Yeah.
So I guess on this journey, on this path, what would you say? It's kind of a two-sided question. What are some of the habits that you now have that assist you in getting to that $100,000 a month? And what are some of those ones that you had to change in order to also get there? What was holding you back? What's now propelling you forward?
Okay, so focus determines results. It's whatever we're focusing on. And listen, I am by no means, I by no means have this mastered. Okay, I want to first say that. I'm human.
Right.
I screw it up all the time. But we're either, Ben Franklin said the way to get rich is either, augment your means or diminish your wants, right? So either want less and save more, right? Or increase your means, increase your income, increase your investing results. And we've got to make sure that we're focusing on the things that make money more than the things that save money. Nobody ever got rich saving money. Nobody ever got rich saving money.
I was hoping you would. I was like, is he going to repeat that? Is he going to repeat that? Because I was waiting. I was going to say, please repeat that, because that is so key. We can totally go like, well, I'll just hold on tight fisted to what I do have. And, for some of us that are natural spenders, we probably should have learned a little bit of that.
A little bit of that. Yeah. It doesn't mean be wasteful. It just means, where is your focus? Is your focus on earning money? Because the world, as we know, Jay, is a very abundant place. In up economies and down economies and stagnant economies, there is abundance everywhere. And I hate to be so trite with these sayings, but Zig Ziglar, he had a great one. He said, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. So you and I, we help people get into the real estate investing game.
Yep.
And people want that, and they reward us handsomely for it. And other people help people with other things. Everything you want is there. It's not like anything is being created or diminished in the world. It's just changing hands. And you know what's interesting about that, by the way, in terms of mindset and that abundance mindset, is look at the Great Recession. The biggest economic downturn we had in 7 decades, the worst since the Great Depression in the 30s, right? And, you and I talk about that on our podcast, I'm sure, all the time. I know I do, and I think you do too. And so think about what happened, right? The day before that happened, if you could pick a day, like maybe the day they let Lehman Brothers go under, right? That was when the news was really bad and the stock market really went down the tubes. So think about the world, Jay, that the day before that happened and the day after it happened. Say if you could say the financial crisis happened on a certain day, which I know you can't exactly say, but say it's the year before or after, right? Did the amount of wealth in the world change? Like, wasn't there the same amount of real estate, the same number of homes, the same amount of oil, the same amount of gold, the same amount of ideas, the same amount of intellectual property? It's not like the amount changed, right? It was all the intrinsic wealth of the earth did not change in the financial crisis.
Right.
It did change hands.
Yes.
Okay.
That's very true.
That's a whole discussion for another episode about how the rich keep getting richer, and that's another discussion, right? But the same intrinsic wealth was there. So the world, if we can agree, is an abundant place, and it is critically important, like you say, about that we not be tight-fisted and we focus on earning more, on increasing our means, increasing our results. It amazes me how sometimes I'll start thinking, business is a little slow. This isn't looking so good. I'm in a slump. And, I've had that many times over the years. And I'll just start being like, oh, maybe I should cut this, cut that, spend less, save more, and that thinking comes in, which is really depression era thinking. And then I'll talk to someone in my circle, and it's like, here they're, flipping crappy little houses and making 30 grand a deal. And I'm thinking, they're doing that in the same time that I'm thinking this. And this is why it's so important to listen to shows like yours and to be around, people that are doing stuff, and Jim Rohn, another stupid quote from Jason, right? Okay. We are the average, our income is the average of the 5 people we spend most of our time with.
Right.
And look, if you're picking your friends and your associates by who just happens to be around you, which really means you're not picking them, you're just letting it happen by default because you happen to get along with someone or someone's easy to hang out with, that is going to limit you like crazy. You got to be in a mastermind group. You got to be hanging around with people who are going places and doing things and have the abundant mindset. You've got to have your earbuds in your ears listening to podcasts like this one that are talking about abundance and growth and success. And that will influence your attitude and your subconscious mind. And after that comes activity. Certainly you got to do something. I had,
you mean it?
Yeah.
I can't just sit at home? Come on.
No. And that's exactly what I was going to say. So I had Joe Vitale on my show just recently. Okay. And, he was, and I also had Bob Proctor on, and both of those guys were in the very famous little film called The Secret, right?
Yep.
And this is the problem with The Secret. The secret is, maybe half of the equation. It's the attitude and mindset part. But it's not that you don't sit at home and think, well, I'm thinking abundant thoughts, so the world is going to beat a path to my door and just give me stuff. Listen, and I do yoga all the time. There are lots of people at yoga studios who believe that. Okay?
Understood.
So you get it, like I'm just picking on sort of the new age mentality.
Yes, I can hear it in your voice.
Yeah. And I like that too. There are lessons there for sure. But it's not the whole equation. You got to go out and do something rather than sit there as an entitled, abundance-minded person.
Yeah, exactly. The keyword there with that entitled, for sure. I mean, is there any part? So let's while we're talking about it and possibly talking to some who could feel entitled in some way, shape, or form, but is there any part of your business where you felt like, how do you feel about the word luck, or when someone says to you, oh, you got lucky in general, in some way, shape, or form? Okay, well, we're going to find out what Jason has to say about luck. And most importantly, it's really important what you believe about luck at the end of the day. Now, you probably have picked up on this. We're going to be doing this type of thing all month long. We're going to be bringing to you individuals who have done at least $100,000 in a month so that you can learn what it's going to take from people who have done it and are doing it in today's marketplace using today's techniques so that you can hopefully begin to get your business there today as well. I'm not going to take up too much time, but I do want to remind everybody, if you want to pick up a copy of my book, Cashflow Diary, 10 Steps to Creating Wealth in Any Economy, you can get your free electronic copy right now. Send a text message to 72,000, 72000. The keyword is book. Send text book to 72,000. Or for those of you internationally, you can go to cashflowdiary.com/free book. And who knows, maybe if you go there, you'll get lucky. Let's find out what Jason has to say about the same concept.
Okay, so I guess I take kind of a middle ground on that because I kind of think I know where you're going with it. Like, I believe that luck exists. Okay, I don't believe it doesn't exist. But, since you can't depend on luck, you've kind of got to manufacture your own. So you should definitely keep a 4-leaf clover in your wallet. I'm joking, by the way. and eat Lucky Charms cereal for breakfast.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Hey, but Lucky Charms are good. You do know that.
Yeah, but they'll probably give you diabetes too. So
Yeah,
anyway.
true. But that's
Yeah.
not the point right now. That's
Exactly.
another episode. That's another
episode. Yeah. But luck exists. It's just the problem is you can't depend on it. So the mentality of I'd rather be lucky than good, is okay, but you can't depend on luck. So you better just be good. And the old saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. I think that's true.
Right.
When you have the abundance mindset and you combine it with activity, as you say, with action, and you go out and you do things and you provide a service to the world, and you do it in a smart way, though. You either do it in a way where you're doing something that's high ticket. Like, look if you're in the business of brokering jets and yachts and luxury homes,
Nice.
you are definitely in the abundance environment, okay? And one client will mean a lot of money to you.
Yeah.
If you're in the business of selling inexpensive widgets, you've got to learn how to do things at scale and focus on systems and processes. And if you're by the way, just to bring it back to the other side of that coin, if you're in the big ticket world and you focus on scalability and systems, you're going to just knock it out of the park. You're going to do great. Okay. So that's the best of both worlds. But you got to be smart about it. But you'll just find that the world just drops opportunities in your lap. If you're associating with the right people, if you put yourself in the right environment, if you show that you are a person who can be trusted and who can be depended upon, and you deliver and you keep your promises and you don't make idle promises, you make promises carefully because you know you can keep them. The world is just going to, deliver things to your door. I mean, it really will, but it didn't deliver them by just thinking about it.
I understand. I get you 100%. Now, you've mentioned the concept a couple of times, and I think I want to get your take on how important it is and what you call them, and more importantly, what types do you use to make things happen. When you've mentioned scale, you've mentioned systems. I wholeheartedly, 100%, I'm behind scale and systems all day long, and definitely scaling large ticket items. But what would you say if you were trying to put together a business today, knowing what you know now? What system or systems would you say are absolutely mission critical that you got to get done no matter what?
Oh man, I tell you, Jay, it is an incredible time to be an entrepreneur. The cost of starting a business has plummeted, and that's only really. And I'll tell you what I think was a game changer. It was the iPhone.
Yep.
That really, I don't know if people realize what a tectonic shift the little humble iPhone was in cloud computing, in usability, in portability, in so many ways. And, for example, the cloud computing revolution has made everything so inexpensive. I used to have, big offices, huge rent for my company, and lots of overhead and employees, and guess what every company had back then. And this was only 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 10 years ago. Microsoft Exchange server. Okay,
God, not that.
And it was so expensive just to deliver email to my company. Okay. Now it's free.
Right. Right.
Okay. Google
Exactly.
will give you that for free. And if you want some customized professional features, $50 a year per person. It's nothing.
You're right.
Okay. I used to have to buy Microsoft Office for every workstation in my company, $400 a desk, plus the hardware.
Right.
And now it's free with Google Docs. Okay. Or Microsoft has a competing product too. Okay. So all of this stuff has just plummeted. There are so many apps and pieces of software that are so cheap. It is amazing. All of these collaboration tools like Teamwork or Asana or Basecamp, all of these things are so inexpensive. It is mind-boggling that you can just run a whole virtual company with staff anywhere on planet Earth, and they can collaborate and communicate, and you can use Skype, and it's free. And all of these things it is amazing. I mean, the cost of opening a business it's just plummeted.
Yeah.
Everybody listening should have some kind of side business. If you have a day job in corporate America, maybe your side business is being a real estate investor, and that is a business, and it should be treated as a business for maximum results. For more basic results, just treat it as an armchair investment, and that's okay too. But, if you treat it like a little business, then you can get some additional tax advantages maybe, and you can get some additional return out of it, and you can be better at it. And I know that's what you obviously teach on your podcast, so I don't need to belabor that one. But there are so many things. I mean, I don't know. Is there, you can just use Facebook for free and have private Facebook groups and collaborate with your team members there. It's just real easy.
What's really funny is that when a couple of, well, I don't know, maybe it was 4 or 5 years ago, when I made a decision, we let go of the office, all that stuff. And when we made that decision, it changed everything. I mean, I know my CFO, she's actually, down in San Diego area. And then the operations officer, she's up in Northern California. And then my executive assistant, I think I may have actually seen her 3 times total.
Yeah. Right.
I didn't even know what she looked like. And she had been working with us for maybe 4 months before we actually met in person. And
I got worse stories than that. I've got people that have been working for me for years I've never met in person. It's amazing.
And these are the things that, that these are the systems and the possibilities. I look at when you mentioned the iPhone, I'm like, yep, because it is the distribution mechanism. I mean, for some of you listening right now, it would be too much money for me to try to reach you, period. But you bought an iPhone and they got iTunes and we can record. And if you really wanted to, you can record on your iPhone and have a podcast going in no time flat. The amount of things that are at our disposal are absolutely incredible. But this begs the question, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
To get to $100,000 in a month, to even have a business that does $1 a month, if all of these things are so plentiful, they're everywhere. If this is so possible, how come there aren't more people doing it?
That is the question of the ages. I do not have the answer to that one, but just to give a little more context for this, the top 5% in the country earn $159,000 per year, and the top 10% $113,000 per year. So that's almost 10 grand a month. Okay, and what you're talking about here on your series is earning 10 times what the top 10% earn. Okay, and I'm glad to say, I mean, I've been doing that for a long time. And it's a fantastic feeling. Look, just take care of this money thing. I mean, just take care of it. It's not that big a deal. It really isn't. You can do it. Anybody listening can do that. Just get it out of the way, get it off your to-do list, and take care of the money thing. And for all of my life growing up, until I was, I could sense it that I was really going to take care of it when I was about, I guess I was about 24 years old. Okay. And I remember that year working for Remax, I made almost $400,000 as a real estate agent. And then I was also starting to really do investing on the side. And, so I was doing both of those things, and just take care of the money thing. I mean, it's not that big a deal. Just get it out of your way so it doesn't become this burden in your life. And it's not to say that I don't focus on it still, but one other thing, let me share one other concept.
By all means, this is good.
So there's this concept of that I learned at a course many years ago of the two basic things that are competing here. The concept of content and context. Okay.
Yes.
And content is what shows up in our life, what we see, like what kind of house we live in, what kind of relationships we have, what kind of vacations we go on, what kind of clothes we wear. That's the content of our life, right? And we can see that and evaluate it, and we're evaluating it all the time as human beings. But then there's the concept of context. And that's what you were talking about earlier, Jay, when it comes to mindset. And, we talked about Earl Nightingale's quote about, the role of water in the Pacific Ocean. It's everything in the Pacific Ocean. And, the fish in the Pacific Ocean, they don't really think about the fact, I mean, we don't really know, but they probably don't think much about the fact that they live in water. That's just their environment. That's just how they live. It's the context of their life. And everything in their life is generated within the context of water. So inside of water, some things are possible and others are not. Okay, so what's possible inside of water? Well, there's seaweed, there's other fish to eat, there's coral reefs, there's waves and motion, and there are certain things in water, right? Salt, in that example, salt water.
Right.
But they don't have available to them what we live in, our context, which is living on land in the context of air and living in a dry home, okay, and driving cars and going up in spaceships and flying in airplanes. That's not within their environment. So they are limited, and we are also limited because we don't live in their world, okay? Granted, we have scuba divers and things like that, but by and large, we don't really live in their world, and they don't live in ours. And so just understanding that our attitude is our context, and we get to pick that. Yep. We get to decide if our context is $1,000 a month, $10,000 a month, $100,000 a month, or $1 million a month. And that's really up to us. It's up to our decision of how we're going to view our world and the abundant world in general. Are we going to view the world as scarce or abundant? Indeed. And there are many people who make $1 million a month. I'm not one of them, but I know that they're out there. Okay, and that's the funny thing, Jay. By the way, right. We can see these people. We know they exist. We know that Donald Trump exists and Steve Forbes exists, and we know they're out there. And why don't we think we can do that? I'm not exactly sure, but there, some of the questions would be, is that if you hang around with those type of people, your context instantly expands. And that's why I think the mastermind group is so important. That's why I think getting around people who are doing more than you is so important. I think one of all of our goals in life should be when we hang out with people, we want to be the dumbest person there and the poorest person there.
Yep.
Because then it's just like, I'm sure you talk about this on your show, about real estate in a given neighborhood, right? Yeah. If you buy the worst house in the neighborhood, the value of that house is going to be pulled up by the more expensive neighbors. But if you buy the best house in the neighborhood, the value of the house is going to be pulled down by the less expensive neighbors. And that's exactly what happens to us as people. Our neighbors, our people that we're spending time with, are they doing less than us or more than us? Because if they're doing more, we're just naturally going to be pulled up by that. We're going to think bigger, we're going to increase our context, and more is going to be available to us.
Got it. Yes, man, I'm enjoying everything because it's crazy because I know there were times when we're just thinking about context that it feels like a whole person ago when the idea of being able to the one of the ways I experienced this context shift in my journey was there was a time in my life where the idea if I just had $1,000 in my bank account, everything quote unquote felt fine.
Right.
It's like I was fine.
Yeah, that's a whole different person. Yeah,
that's what I mean by a whole different person ago. I'm like, who was that guy?
Right.
And then that number has steadily and drastically increased. It's like, oh my God, I'm down to my last, whatever. It's a much, much bigger number. And it's like, the only difference is that context shift. There was a time where that number could be lower and and it didn't necessarily bother me. It didn't set off any alarm. It didn't matter. But now that's just not the case. And what was vacation then versus a vacation today, and places that were acceptable to go then, places to eat, all this context shifting is amazing and sometimes overwhelming. So I want to ask one question, because I got to ask this one. And I think there's a major, I will say, context shift that needs to happen around the whole idea or concept of experiencing an unwanted result, typically called a mistake. So,
right.
I just got to ask is, which, if any, first of all, I'm just going to assume you've made at least one error in judgment.
More than one.
Right. So, but which, if any, and hear me clearly, do you regret, if any of them?
Oh, well, I'd say I regret a whole bunch of them. But, if you look a little deeper than that, I think they all were there for a lesson, So there's always a lesson. But to answer your question, gosh, which one thing? I don't know. Gosh, I can't think of that. Well, I'll tell you one. I bought a high-rise condo in Las Vegas before I really knew how to be an investor properly. I was more of a speculator back then, and that turned into a disaster. I lost a bunch of money on it, and it was in Palms Place, and they really lied about a lot of things, in my opinion. And these condo tell type deals. I don't know why the heck I did it. I think I did it for the sexiness and, bachelor thinking. But, it was stupid. It was a terrible deal, man. I lost a bundle of money on that. It was awful.
Well,
but I did learn some stuff. So, I guess there's a lesson for sure, right?
And I say that to set up the real question. Do you think it is possible to get to the level of $100,000 a month without making any mistakes? Is there any value in any of those lessons along the journey?
Oh, I don't know. It depends where you're starting to answer that question. If you're starting at making $90,000 a month, I guess you could make 10,000 more and not make a mistake. But if you're like most people and you're starting at $6,000 a month or $5,000 a month and you're going to $100,000 a month, then you're probably going to have some trials and tribulations along the way. So I would say definitely. You're going to make some mistakes, and you got to just view them as learning experiences, minimize them if you can, but also be willing to make them. Without some mistakes, there's just no openness, and that's a closed context mentality of, oh gosh, I got to guard everything. I can't make a mistake. You'll freeze up. You'll get the paralysis of analysis, and then you'll never do anything. So you got to be willing to take some risk. Everybody has heard that. Everybody knows it. Maybe you don't know it at a gut level or intuitively, but you know it at least intellectually, and you got to move it down to the gut. So there's no success without risk.
Agreed, 100%. So as we wind down here, what would you say has been the most transformative person or part of this career, your journey that you've been on, that not only set off that first month of making that happen, but more importantly has lasted through, the time that you've been in business and around?
Well, certainly investing in real estate has been totally transformative because it has leverage. It's multidimensional. It's such a powerful asset class. As I always say, it's the most historically proven asset class in the world. And I just absolutely love income property. It's a very, very powerful thing. And so that's been transformative. But maybe more generally, the idea of context and content that we just discussed, that's transformative. And the overall result of just taking care of the money thing. I've traveled to 78 countries now, Jay, and I remember the end of last summer, I was in Peru with a bunch of high level friends of mine who are doing big things and making a lot of money, and they increase my thinking. They make me think I want to go further and do more. And I remember one time we had stayed on that trip. We'd stayed at this gorgeous hotel. I don't remember the name of it, but it was just spectacular. And I've stayed in some nice hotels, but this one, I mean, it was in Peru, but it was still incredibly nice. Mm-hmm. And, in the closet, it had, multiple bathrobes to choose from. It had multiple sets of slippers. It had in the room, a full bar with real booze that you could just take, and food and everything. It was so abundant. Okay. Yeah. And it was just a stunning hotel. And, this was included in our trip, which, I don't know, cost about $8,500, maybe $9,000 to go on the trip for maybe 5 days. But I asked at the front hotel, and a couple other people asked, because this hotel was so impressive. We asked, how much is this per night, if you just want to book a room here? And they said, well, $1,200 a night, but you probably get it for $900. And I thought, I've never paid $900 or certainly not $1,200 a night for a hotel. And then I remember I recorded a podcast the next morning from that location. And I told my listeners, like I said to your listeners today, I said, just take care of this money thing. Get it out of the way. It's a noose around your neck. You just got to check it off your to-do list so that it isn't an issue anymore. And, the way it's not an issue is when you could easily stop working and you're completely out of the rat race, as Robert Kiyosaki likes to say. Your passive income, your investments, and they're almost undoubtedly going to be real estate, okay, because that's what really works, can just fund your lifestyle without doing anything else. Yeah. And that's when you've taken care of the money thing.
I'm just, you just reminded me of another context shift that I went through. And my team, and I still go through it from time to time because I still remember, squatting in bank-owned property and sleeping in my car and all that stuff. So if left to my own devices, there will be times where I will, on my own, I'll go, hey, Motel 6 is great for me. But my team, when they're booking my travel, they absolutely refuse to let that happen. They always, they always send me to the other place. And it's fine. It's just funny because there was a time where, hey, Motel 6, I'm good. And, I got a roof over my head. That was the only thing that was necessary. But that context shift, I think you're right, is the thing that has been by far the most transformative. Well, I want to say again, I appreciate the time and energy and efforts that you put into developing the individuals around you, that you put into, sharing right here today, and that you put into yourself, just becoming a bigger, better version of who you are, so that we do have something to share, and taking the time to share it here.
Yep. Good stuff. Thank you so much, Jay. I appreciate it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what you need to do. You've heard it on this particular episode. There are so many places to go, so many resources were given. Get them all, make it happen, because, as Jason just said, just take care of the money thing. It's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.